Hello and a warm Collisions YYC welcome to my returning guest, Mr. Jeff Davison. How are you doing, Jeff?
I'm good. How are you?
I am fantastic. If you don't know, there is a mayoral race going on in Calgary right now, an election coming up on October 20th. We're recording, we're on the 7th, so kind of one of the second days of kind of the of early advanced voting. Jeff, you and I have crossed paths before. I'll be candid. I'm a supporter of how you show up, and I'm a supporter of some of the things you put on the table. And this is my way and my platform of engaging with people to have meaningful conversations beyond sound bites. So thanks for coming back on. And I'm going to ask a very broad question. How goes the race so far?
Well, first, thank you for having me back on. I really appreciate it. And thank you for your support. And you've been amazing too, because I think we talked about this a little bit last time. Traditional media, there's been so many cutbacks. It's so hard to get messaging out, and just really appreciate being able to come on shows like this and just get out to an audience that is engaged. So thank you. It's going great. Honestly, we talked last time about how I've seen this movie before, but what a way different experience in this campaign versus last time. I think we've built a very strong campaign team. All of my team came back this campaign, but the amount of people that have joined us from other campaigns has been like just tremendous. It's been overwhelming because I think people go, hang on a second here, like, we need somebody reasonable. We need somebody with a plan, and Jeff's our guy. And so it's been a light and day difference over what it felt like last time.
So working on a campaign like this for everyone involved is not a get rich quick. These are people that are putting their hearts, their souls, and most importantly, their most valuable asset, their time, to volunteer. Like, this is almost exclusively a volunteer environment, correct?
It really is. I mean, I think you rely on just the kindness of others and the volunteer aspect. And I think, again, that's the greatest thing about Calgary is our ability to stand up and volunteer and get involved with things like election campaigns. I mean, the difference between last time and now, being an incumbent before, you certainly have access to a different pool of funding, and you see that with some of the candidates. But man, all things aside, this campaign is about creating a safe and affordable city of opportunity for everyone, and people have really leaned into that messaging.
The difference is 21. We were in COVID. We were focused on. We were stay at home. The city was at a different cycle. Just talk to me about some of the differences you're seeing kind of out there and where our population is at, but compared to those two campaigns.
It's been interesting because I think a lot of people are still relatively thinking about, who they're going to vote for. And so I think 50% plus are still sitting in the undecided camp. And that's a good thing for us because the campaigns really come down to the last 2 weeks in terms of what you're putting out there, how you're resonating with people, and just how are they feeling about the election in general. And so that's actually an interesting point. I mean, we're day 2 now of advanced polling. The advanced poll numbers are way down from 2021 numbers. And maybe that's because of a pandemic. People thought, I'll go out early so there isn't such a crowd on election day. We don't really know, but I can tell you that I wasn't hedging on advanced polls by any means. I think election day is going to be the important day for us. And I think that's exactly what we predicted is now happening.
That's so interesting. You're right. Just such a different world from 21 to 25 in terms of where people are at, how they're engaged. It feels like to me as a citizen that we've got more things on top of mind. We've got a city that feels less safe than it did before. We've got infrastructure that doesn't feel like it's maybe advanced in the way, like from the problem set that you're facing, how much of it is the same and how much of it is maybe gotten worse and people are more concerned about, like, how are the issues fundamentally shifted in that period of time? And clearly that really points to where we as citizens kind of should be putting our focus, our attention.
Yeah, I mean, I think overwhelmingly we hear about the 3 issues around public safety, affordability, infrastructure. I think people are quite upset, not just with our mayor, but they're upset with council. And I've always called for sort of a wholesale change to council. I think they failed on all 3 of those things. Nobody, when we go into, even at debates, I'll say, does anybody feel safer today than they did 4 years ago? And it's never, right? It's unprecedented how much people feel unsafe in our city. I mean, seniors don't want to walk around downtown. Young people won't take transit. Our own operators of transit are being attacked on the job. Our firefighters are just pushed to the max in terms of some of the calls they're going to these days without the right resources. I mean, public safety is the number one concern people have. Infrastructure, we recognize now, and I think everybody feels the $7 billion deficit in infrastructure, right? When we don't take care of the roads, when the water stops running, people really start to question, how are we going to manage growth? Because let's be clear, 70,000 people are moving to Calgary every year. It's why I'm saying roll back the blanket rezoning, because at the end of the day, building 4 units at a time with basement suites doesn't actually keep up with the demand, nor does it create affordability in saying, well, the average row house is starting at $750,000. We have to think about how we build density, where density goes, how we involve communities, and still meet that demand. I mean, even on an affordability side, when we talk about, affordability challenges, what can the city do? And current city council has been saying, well, we have an affordability crisis. And I agree, but then they go and increase our taxes. So you can't tell me there's an affordability crisis and then charge people more money. And so positioning now a property tax freeze over the next 4 years, getting our budgets back in line, managing our reserves differently, managing our risk profile differently, investing in core services and not pet projects, it's a game changer between our campaign and others.
And I appreciate that. And, I've heard you speak, you and I have chatted before, and a lot of those fundamentals, it's hard not to agree with. But I guess the question that comes up for me, and you and I have talked about this off air, you're one guy, you are one voice. And yes, you are a big voice and you're a powerful voice when it comes to your seat on council and your ability to create influence. How does one person come in? You made the comment of we need a wholesale change. What does that actually look like in real life? Like if this was a business, which is, I know, a dangerous thing to compare a city, even though it's a very large business. How do you create that kind of change when you don't have that top down, I'm going to decide and today we will do this new direction? How do you show up and then create that level of change that, everything you said makes sense. We'll maybe unpack some of them later, but what does that look like to you on kind of maybe day one, but maybe day 400?
All the issues aside in our city, let me start by saying this. Calgary's the greatest city on earth. We just want to make it better.
And how, my friend, and how?
and the nice thing is, I think when we talk about all of these new councillors that are going to be elected, they're going to believe the same, right? We all fundamentally might have a different plan and approach to things like affordability and infrastructure, but we all believe the same. We're trying to make life better. And so that's a good starting point. The election for me isn't about, it's not about just public safety or just infrastructure or just affordability. It actually comes down to something completely different. To me, it's about leadership, it's about experience, and it's about vision. Because I think and to your point of the question, I think, how do you lead a new council? How I've always done it in every other sector I've been a part of, right? I've never had a party at the table with me. I'm not an expert and a doctor in my day job now. My ability is, how do we bring people together, find the common ground, and get things done? And that's how we'll treat council, right? It's the ability to say, look, I've got 25 years in energy, technology, healthcare, film. I've sat on council. I have the experience to do this job. But it's that leadership style about bringing people together and finding that common ground that will set me apart from others. I'm a much more collaborative leader than others. And let's face it, all of these new members of council will have gone through the largest exercise in public engagement probably in their history. That is an election. So it's bringing all of those things you've learned at the doors and talking to people through conversations and months of that. Bring those things to the table so that we can formulate a strategic plan as the next council and then really get focused on what's on the table and what's off the table for the next 4 years.
I appreciate that. And one of the things I value about you is your time in the private sector, but Calgary Prostate Cancer Center, like leading an organization like that where you never have enough resources to do the things you need to do. So I think there's some interesting similarities and like kind of coming from that large business background, but a business where oftentimes in those sectors, you kind of almost have one hand tied behind your back because there's always a bigger need than there is the funding. And I think to me, that feels like really good training for laying that framework for, I know you've come up with, there's going to be a tax freeze. That doesn't mean job cuts. That means assessing where to best use our resources. That's not always the mindset that government, like sometimes government gets bigger just because that's what government does. And I'm not hearing you approaching it that way, right?
Yeah. No, I mean, look, I don't think it's not about taxes or people not wanting to pay taxes. It's really about, are we getting value for the tax dollar?
Yeah.
And, over the past 4 years, we've seen a 23% increase to city staff. We've seen our taxes go up by 29%. I think, people are starting to scratch their heads and say, I get paying taxes, but I don't get where the money's going now. And so that's where we've got to get focused and figure out how we get back to the fundamentals of running a city. Focus on core services, get back to basics, if you will, and lay the foundation over the next 4 years about what the next 20 years of Calgary is going to be. Like, again, we're going to continue to be a place of opportunity. We want to welcome people from around the world. We want to bring all of those great minds and big business companies and otherwise here to Calgary. we're not going to do that on taxes alone. We have to create a vibrant city. We have to create a place where people want to be. But over the next 4 years, it really is about setting up that long-term vision of Calgary and setting up how we get back to basics to ensure that as we continue to attract people to our city, as we provide that place of opportunity, well, we also have to make sure the water still works and that, the 100%. Roads are paved and, we pay the fire department, right?
If I work for the city and that's part of my career and that's what I do, does this sound like a do more with less strategy, or is this, removing friction internally? Because, if you take away what we all see as individuals, like, too much red tape at City Hall and it's hard to get projects done. I think about those individuals, those legit employees of this very large organization. What do you say to them in terms of this message around, we're going to do more with less, but to do that, we're actually going to make your jobs easier by removing friction? I'm putting some of my own thoughts in there. Yeah. What are the things that actually frees up a team to go, man, we've been dying to get this done, but we just couldn't get through our own red tape, which I'm sure is plentiful inside the organization.
And that is the largest message I hear from inside. I mean, once you've been on city council, you continue to have relationships with people inside the system itself. And I think people like the general public right now, they don't feel like our own employees at the city don't feel heard by council, and they don't feel that council's setting them up for success. And that, at the end of the day, that's my job. I just want to see everybody be successful. So, by investing in core services, we're not talking about cuts. We're actually talking about getting realigned so that everybody can do their job successfully and continue to make life better in Calgary every single day for everyone who lives here. That's really the goal of the 22,000 plus people that work at the city. It's how do we make life better, and how do we as council support them in doing their jobs? I think we've seen, and I've done probably, I don't know, it feels like 100 forums by now, but consistently I hear from the members of council this sort of finger pointing that goes on. And one city councillor in particular keeps sort of, almost like using lines like, administration will come to heel and they will understand. And it's like, they're the experts and they're here to provide their best professional advice. What they don't understand is the direction that council's giving them, because you're not being clear and concise with the direction. In fact, I don't think council's given them any direction. So council's job is to get together, set the priorities for the city, and then provide the governance and oversight to managing those priorities. It's administration's job to be the experts and tell us how they can deliver that program. Just two fundamentally different ways of approaching how we're going to run a $5.5 billion a year corporation known as the City of Calgary.
A massive business. How dangerous is it, when you talk about those kind of, that kind of messaging that, come to heel, and I'm not informed enough to even know who that is, so I'm not playing into that at all. But like those kind of conversations or that rhetoric can be very appealing in a society where we're frustrated. We're not seeing results. We're citizens. I live in Marda Loop. I've talked to business owners, state of chaos the last 3 to 4 years in the streets here. So people hear messages like that. I can see where they do kind of spark a little bit of like rah, like us against them kind of mindset. I feel in the long run, that's very toxic, but I also understand when you're frustrated, someone willing to crack some heads or make comments like that, as silly as they are, they can be dangerously appealing. I think I don't know, I guess maybe that's a philosophical comment on how careful we have to be when we feel like we don't have any power and we're not getting the change we want. It's easy to gravitate to that kind of messaging, I think.
But I would say this to citizens who are, considering their candidates in the election. For the people that are saying that, those members of council, let's be clear. They have had 4 years to fix the problem.
Touché.
And they've done nothing. And so all of a sudden, in an election year, we've got to find somebody to blame. See, that's not how I run leadership. I think you've got to respect staff to earn staff's respect in return. You have to provide clear communication, clear direction, clear, consistent rules that say, here's how we're going to operate as a city, right? And I don't see that from council. And it's super frustrating being on the outside when all of a sudden members of council show up and they're like, ta-da, we have a safety plan now. And I'm like, well, where was that 3.5 years ago when you knew the plan had already failed, when you knew citizens were saying, we don't feel safe in our city? I mean, it
feels dangerously convenient, Jeff.
it's politics, right?
Yes, it is. Touche. Thinking about, you're moving into an organization where there's significant change required. People are looking to a new leader, in this case yourself, to live up to the promises, to live up to the, be the candidate you promised to be during that election cycle. And at the same time, any of us who are in business know that these things take time.
Yeah.
We've all read the 30, 60, 90-day plans for new team members. But you keep referencing 4 years. I'm an outsider looking in. When do I start to see change? When do I start to go as a citizen, I guess they are kind of doing what they said they were going to do. Like, that doesn't happen overnight. How do you start looking at the reality of time frame, knowing 4 years is real, And there's stuff that's going to happen between now and then.
I think, I've always had this idea of having a chief accountability officer, right? Working between city council and administration to just make sure that we're communicating back to the public. Did you do what you said you were going to do? And where are we on that report? And again, I think that's why, in healthcare, I learned have a strategic plan, because you need a guiding post to say, this is what we can do in our world. This is what we can't do. And we need the same thing as city council. We need to be able to say, this is what's on the table, but just as important, this is what's off the table, and then measure back to those things and report that to citizens. I mean, at the end of the day, hopefully what people see over the first, year in particular is, hey, the roads seem like they're getting cleaned up. The water's still working properly. I feel safe enough that I can take public transit. And you're right, they're going to take moves to get there. But I think far too often in government, they make decisions. And then when the decision doesn't work, they throw their hands up and say, well, we've tried nothing, man, and we're all out of ideas.
I love that expression.
To me, it's a great Simpsons expression, right?
It is.
But to me, you have to be able to pivot, right? And I think the biggest thing in the campaign for us right now is talking about how we pivot as a city. What we're doing is not working. Infrastructure's failing. Public safety is an all-time low. We've got to be able to make some moves. And I tell people all the time, look, like, even on a public safety standpoint, we're going to bring all the levels of government together. We're going to bring policing agencies together. We're going to bring all those wraparound care and community service agencies together. We're going to make some mistakes. I know we are, but we're going to try to move fast. And when and where we do make those mistakes, we're going to learn from them, and we're going to move quickly to solve them. And that's exactly what I've learned in healthcare, right? Dealing with people who are going through a cancer diagnosis, unfortunately, sometimes mistakes can happen. The difference is that the city, we're affecting people's lives. In cancer care, we're literally dealing with their life. So we try to get it right, but when and where you don't get it right, you really have to pivot quickly to make sure that the outcome becomes positive again. And I think as government, we have to be able to do the same.
That's a challenging narrative when we've got a society that, yeah, we want change. And, oh, by the way, make sure it's perfect every time. Like, those things don't really go together, but we tend to not create a lot of space and a lot of opportunity for our leaders to try something and not maybe, and I don't want to say fail, because there's a lot of versions of, we didn't get the best results, but we at least tried something and we learned and we moved it forward. Yep. You made a lot of references to safe city, and I don't think there's anybody or any candidate that I've seen that isn't talking about the need for safety. As I was reading this morning and doing a little research from the web to my GPT to all the things, I really noticed a bit of a rhetoric where sometimes it positioned you as more policing forward versus social program forward. But I've heard you speak, and I don't know if that's true or not. I've seen a bit of a balance of, yes, we need more policing because we need to create safety immediately. And we also need to go, like the joke, if people keep falling in the river, maybe you need to go check the bridge. So there is that upstream of the social programs. How do you respond to that? Like, oh, well, Jeff, he's more about heavy-handed policing and other candidates are more about social programs. I'm kind of setting it up because I don't think that's what I've heard you say.
No, I mean, it's all about balance, right? I mean, and again, one of the biggest learnings running a provincial-wide health charity, you have to be proactive. I mean, in that world, we have a disease where it has little to no symptoms until it's too late. So getting out and being proactive about getting guys to talk about their health is incredibly important. But then once a disease happens, you have to deal with it. And so it's very much like the situation we're in right now. It unfortunately becomes a situation where complex problems do not have simple answers. And there's a lot of levers that you have to pull. And the right thing is balance. We do have the lowest number of officers to citizen ratio per capita of any major North American city.
You told me that when we chatted last. That still kind of blows me away, but it also makes sense when you drive around downtown for 10 minutes, right?
Yeah. So, that has to be addressed. And we have to get much more proactive about dealing with crime. That's going to require bail reform and working with the federal government and our community court system to make sure that when and where we're arresting the bad people, we keep them off the streets for,
don't cycle them back out the door in 24 hours, right?
Well, and knowing that the minute you cycle them back out, they're just back preying on the same people that have fallen victim to mental health and addiction challenges, right? So, there's the proactive side, which is really about policing. There is the reactive side, which is also about policing. But then when you think about all of the healthcare component of what we're doing, it's also on both sides. Like, you have to be able to catch people at entry points into where things are failing for them. So let's say, how do we coordinate services that day one, when somebody goes to a food bank, they're much more likely to have follow-on problems because they're now at a food bank. So we know likely 3 months from now, the potential of them losing their job might be there, or maybe they have lost a job. That then, loses shelter because now they couldn't pay the rent and they've been evicted. And now they're on the street and now falling victim to addiction and other things. how do we back the system up to make sure that we're catching people at the entry point, however they come in, almost having like a super back end? How do we catch them at that point and make sure that we stop them from eroding down the process of where we don't want them to go? But for the people that are in that process, we have to think differently about how we deal with the mental health and addiction side of what we're seeing on the streets. And so that's where the healthcare component of working with the province fits in, right? Like you have to be, like I say, pulling every lever in this. You can't just try one thing and say, well, it worked or didn't work. It really does require a task force type approach, which is really what I've positioned, right? Again, how do we get the feds at the table with us? How do we get the province at the table with us? Dealing with, justice reform, dealing with healthcare reform. How do we as a city deal with the policing situation? But then how do we involve all of the community and wraparound care agencies to help us that, from a point of when somebody is on the street, they can pick them up and put them into agencies that might be able to help them get out of the system, or they can help prevent people falling victim to getting into that system to begin with.
I really appreciate your position of understanding where somebody is on that journey and what is the right intervention, and also really speaks to the complexity of that issue. You can't just look at it and go, get people off the street, or it's so easy to blanket and armchair quarterback it versus like, well, what stage are they at? And an intervention here can stop five steps down the line. And the slippery slide metaphor, I think, really works for that. But understanding where to intervene, and even something you said about putting first responders on fire trucks, and some of the things I've seen that from the outside, I'm like, that sounds so practical. Like, and I know it's not easy and it's not a magic brush, but it feels like something like that, boom, could change the dynamic right away from our lack of access and, kind of challenges around ambulance and EMT services in the city and in the province. Those kind of things you go, sounds like common sense, but I know it's not that simple. So I don't want to downplay that either. Common sense is a dangerous term on so many fronts.
But it's just about having the right resource for the right response, right? And coordinating the response to make sure that from a first responder standpoint, you think about all of the things going on the streets right now. This is far different than even 5-6 years ago in those jobs. The situation that they're having to deal with is tremendously different. And in a lot of cases, things that people didn't train for. And so, the idea of even having the fifth firefighter on a truck, which is what, the firefighters are telling us they want anyways. We need more personnel on vehicles. Why not have them trained as, advanced life support or advanced paramedics on the truck itself? And that's a good relationship that we can partner with the province on, right? They're healthcare, they run EMS, but this is a situation where we can help advance to calls by just having that training on the job with us.
But the logistics of the vehicles going out anyways, we already have the unit, we've already invested in the team, just putting a new body, although still a cost, a lower cost solution than putting more necessarily full-fledged ambulances on the street. Like, if you just want to weigh that out, there's always a cost, but that seems, and also back to your point, you can operationalize that seemingly fairly quickly if people get on board, if people align.
Absolutely. And this is a good case where, we have so many red alerts that are called in Calgary where that just means that there's no available ambulances in the city. I mean, from a healthcare perspective, ambulances are doing their best to, revive people, get them off the streets, get them into the hospital, get the care, but then they're stopped at the entry point of the hospital. There's wait times to get them in. Triage is probably not moving as fast as it can on certain nights. And all of a sudden that backlog happens. What we need to ensure is that we've got public safety handled from all aspects when and where those critical situations happen. And that just really is thinking through our resources differently.
And so those are some of the things that as a citizen, unless you're aware of it, you just expect it when you pick up that phone, you're going to get the reaction you expect. And, I've heard a little bit through following your campaign and being some of your events of some of the challenges around some of that stuff that's just under the surface as a city that go, wait a second. What do you mean there isn't an ambulance available when I need one? And certain things that we've just grown to expect. When you call 911, you expect someone to answer the phone and a reaction to take place. Hey, I've noticed something in the campaign from, we chatted a few months back, had a great conversation. And I would say it was similar. Your platform hasn't changed in my mind in terms of these are the things that are important to me, but I've noticed a little bit of shift in rhetoric around openness and campaign finances, pet projects. There seems to me that there's a little bit more pointed rhetoric coming out from your camp around, hey, there's some things going on here we might want to, back to your comment about politics. So I wanted to talk about them because they do matter, and I've noticed them coming out a little bit more. It's just the cycle we're in right now, being a few weeks out from election, that sometimes we got to point out the things that are wrong so we can fix them. I don't know. Where do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think you certainly at this point in the campaign you'll see a lot stronger language, right? At the end of the day,
Yeah.
we've got 50% of people who are undecided, and we're trying to get people to pay attention to our campaign and come and vote for us. And that's where sometimes you have to point out a bit of the challenge and what you would do differently. I call it kind of finish your sentence, right? It's one thing to kind of complain and get angry about what somebody's doing, but then finish your sentence and say what you're going to do differently. And I think that's where a lot of the problems are getting highlighted to the point of, some stronger language, but the solutions are still the same. And, the plan is still the same.
I do appreciate that. And I just noticed the difference slightly in the message as it's shifting and getting a little bit more pointed. And also, I guess when 50% undecided, part of this is also motivating people enough to get off the couch and go out and vote. The fact that you're
Yep.
such a drop off in kind of the early voting and all the dynamics society wise they're driving to that. But I've met a few people really, and people are kind of overwhelmed with candidates and everyone's kind of agreeing that a lot of the things that we're saying is important, but then how do you know who's going to do that best job and experience? And it's very tricky having a lot of empathy for people going, I don't know. I never think about this all year. And all of a sudden now I have to make a decision. It can be a bit overwhelming.
Yeah. And the biggest thing I think I tell people in terms of how to consider a candidate is, who do you trust? Right? I mean, do you trust that city council is going to do anything different tomorrow than they are today? Probably not.
That was on thin ice, Jeff. That was on thin ice.
Well, yeah. And do you trust people who say one thing and are known one thing and then flip the script and do something different? I mean, that's where, to me, our plan has always been the same. Day one, we announced a tax freeze. Day two, we announced a public safety measure program. Day three, we announced an infrastructure and affordability piece. All those things matter, right? And consistency matters. And I ask people to look at who brings the experience, who's got the right leadership style to take Calgary forward, and who actually has a vision for our city. I mean, again, we complain a lot about the issues going on, but we can fix those issues. I have no doubt about that. It's who's got the vision to take our city forward. Because I have so many people that just ask me, and even for myself as a father, what's the city going to be like for my kids in 10 years, right? And again, that's where we come back to that vision of just be a safe, affordable place of opportunity for everybody. Our goal is very simple. Let people succeed.
Which is why so many of us come here, because I fell in love with the city and I didn't leave just because of that. I fell in love with that so strong. And there's lots of great places to live in Canada. No one supports that entrepreneurial opportunity and allowing you to create opportunities by creating value better than Calgary, and certainly better than Alberta, but definitely Calgary. Talk to me about the party system. I'm kind of confused. And a lot of people I know are confused about this party system. And as I was reading it today, trying to get less confused, I'm not sure if I got there or not. A better Calgary, community first, the Calgary party, some similar rhetoric, some different rhetoric, some slightly centrist, some left, some right. What are your, is it muddying the waters? What's going on?
It's interesting because it's a provincial pilot in both Calgary and Edmonton that they're trying for a very first time. And I think, I think certainly there are some parties out there, like the ABC party, for instance. I think they're very grassroots led. They have members. They act like a real party. Their branding is consistent. I get it. I mean, Calgary party, kind of the same, right? They don't run on a members basis, but, you can tell they're part of a party. And then there's some parties that are very, I would say, discombobulated, almost to the point of, are you trying to trick me that you're part of a party, you're not part of a party? Because it seems a little bit odd that the marketing isn't all aligned. I chose to run as an independent because I value independence, right? I value the diversity of thought around the council table. I value, that conversations can solve big problems, right? We value innovation. And I suppose from a healthcare perspective, I've just learned that I need those different perspectives in order to create the best possible outcome I can for our patients.
When you put the patients at the center, in that case of the care, the rest is whatever it takes, right?
Yeah. And so I look at it from a party perspective and say, as the leader, I'm going to work with who gets elected, and that's okay. I think you'll have a varying degree of people from different parties elected all across the board. But at the end of the day, I think it's not about having a mayor and councillors that are all part of one party, because I think that doesn't create any real diversity of thought. I think that's where the Better Calgary party sticks out a little bit. I mean, they've obviously endorsed me as their mayoral candidate, and that's great. I truly appreciate.
At this point, I think all endorsements are from that perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But it also tells me that they're willing to work with somebody outside their party. The other parties are kind of all contained and within. And
I
ABC is
did get
willing
that as I
to,
was reading it. Yeah, totally.
yeah. And so it tells me that there's collaboration there. And at the end of the day, that's what we're going to need, because that's how you formulate the best possible plan to deliver services to Calgarians.
Is the real value proposition that there will be more people aligned because they happen to get voted onto council from the same party? So maybe the ability to unite and get things done. Is that the value? Is that the promise? Was that the value proposition, or is that just my interpretation?
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think the value prop was really all around ideology and do we all believe in the same things? You know, are you a quote unquote conservative? Are you a quote unquote liberal, or whatever that means? At the end of the day, I really don't think Calgarians care. I think they care about Calgarians. I think they care about a plan that works for all Calgarians. And I've always felt that as a mayoral candidate, I have to be the mayor for everybody, right? So no matter how I got to the table, independence for me was important, because I really do have to be the mayor for everybody.
And to your point, pilot project. So it was always my understanding is that municipal politics was a bit more bipartisan that way. Of course, people had their leanings and their preferences of how they showed up with their policies, but specifically have it separated from provincial or federal politics. I thought that was part of the value, because you're right. You're the mayor for everybody, no matter what. You know, I guess that could be said from a prime minister. That's the ground we're not going to wade into right now. We're going to leave that one off the table.
Yeah.
It's a polarizing topic in Western Canada. But I always felt that there was a difference in municipal politics that way, because it was, and I'm using the word bipartisan, maybe not correctly, but that it wasn't party driven, and that was part of what made it unique in its way of the city that you were in, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, when you're filling potholes, it doesn't care if it's a blue pothole or a red pothole, right? You just got to fill the pothole. And so it's different than the other orders of government that way, right?
Yeah, where literally the rubber meets the road is highly practical in a city environment, because the policies and the things that get done will affect you tomorrow on your way to work, or your small business, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
What surprised you on this campaign? You're out, you're talking to people all the time. Your schedule exhausts me when I see you all around town and doing all these things, but you must have run into some amazing individuals that have brought things up or asked you questions that gave you pause. You got anything that stands out for you that, you had your mission and you've been very focused on it. And at the same time, you're constantly getting external feedback, because you're now on stage and I'm going to tell you what I think through asking you a question or whatever the case may be. Any stick out that really kind of surprised you or that made you take a pause?
I don't think there's any particular question that has stood out that sort of made me pause. I think sometimes when you run a campaign, you say, what's going on out there isn't working and I'm going to do it differently. The amount of people that go, exactly, we want to see it differently. That has actually surprised me. The appetite for change has really surprised me. I think those affordability pressures, that public safety sentiment, just from an infrastructure standpoint of what's going on next door to me, people are angry. They're very angry, and they're looking for change. I think our biggest job is, all things aside, sitting as the next city council, it's all going to be about rebuilding trust with the public. I'm surprised how bad trust has been broken with this council.
No, we feel unheard. We feel not listened to. And I've talked to people in different communities around the city and run into that multiple fronts. And I think, I'm in South Calgary, kind of Marda Loop area. And, the blanket rezoning was interesting. We were getting rezoned and like fourplexes getting thrown up on every corner. And I went to a few of those meetings and there was literally like, we're doing this meeting, but we're not listening. And that feeling came loud and clear. And I know obviously then blanket rezoning came and a lot of other communities felt the same way. Just picking on that, because I know that's a pretty hot topic that a lot of the candidates have locked onto. So rather than getting into individual topics, it's now 3.5 years from now, you are the mayor. And Calgary is now XYZ, taking into consideration a lot of these different hot button items that are on my sheet in front of me, but rather going through them one-on-one. I'm going to give you an opportunity to wave your magic wand and paint us a picture. It's 3.5, 4 years from now, and Calgary has moved in a direction that you envision. Walk us through. What's the Calgary 4 years from now?
I hope it's the ability for us to make you successful, right? And I think success is defined something differently for everybody. I think, development should not be as hard as it has been in our city. I don't want to see neighbors fighting neighbors over parking. From a safety standpoint, I think I would hope that our ridership numbers on transit go way up, because people feel safe and protected and able to move around the city on transit. I think that from an opportunity standpoint, people will see that, we are attracting new headquarters to Calgary. We are sort of setting the table for new jobs to thrive. We are supporting the trades and ensuring that as we create development opportunities in our city, that it becomes consistent, right? And it's clear. And Calgary once again becomes the place where people know they can come here and make a life.
I appreciate that. Climate crisis, are we focusing on it? Have we changed the rhetoric? What's that looking like in 4 years?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not focused on any climate crisis by any means. I mean, I think what we're going to do is obviously we value a cleaner, greener city, but let's take care of our things like our parks. Let's take care of our pathways. You know, one of the biggest things I think we can do to affect climate is actually a traffic synchronization program, so that, you know, you stop the red light stop every 10 minutes or every 10 seconds in cars, right? It's just, how do you make life easier for people?
Who can't get behind more green lights, Jeff? Come on.
Oh, man, I'm telling you.
A metaphor for so many things. Okay.
And there's absolutely opportunities to do these things. And those are the types of things we're going to invest in, right? We want to make sure it doesn't take, 20 minutes to go down the street.
But it could take 5. Bike lanes, do we have more? Do we have less? Do we have the same?
I'm calling on a freeze on the bike lane program. In fact, we're going to remove bike lanes where they've been negatively impacting businesses. When businesses tell you that their sales are down by 40% because the parking's been taken away, that's not a good situation. I mean, let's remember that small business in Calgary is the largest employer in our city, and so we have to do more to support. So, it's okay to remove bike lanes in places that aren't working. But I'll tell you, going forward, the city had a plan of $45 million over the next year to spend on bike lanes. We're absolutely going to halt that and redirect that funding back into other critical services that we need to be investing in before we go down that path.
The decisions that are made to make the zero tax increase actually workable, to your point.
Yep.
What about our downtown? What does that look like? Do we have more conversions? Obviously it's going to be safer. I think I'm going to boldly agree with you that I think that needs to happen without question. But are we revitalizing? And what does revitalization look like? Because it's an easy word to throw around.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all of those things. I think it's safer. I think our downtown will have seen the success of some of those revitalizations. I don't know how many more we'll see of that, because there's just a limited amount of buildings that we can make those conversions possible in. But I think it's going to be, I want to see vibrancy return to the core. I want to see it as a place where people feel comfortable to take their kids on the weekend. I want people enjoying our library downtown. I want people to enjoy the new Workland Center and Arts Commons. We want people to thrive in the downtown, and that hopefully will also include how we've managed to attract opportunities to the downtown, right? Like when we think about our energy industry right now, massive consolidations are happening all over again. And so we've got to be pretty thoughtful about economic diversification.
Yeah. Well, Arts Commons is a great example. The library is phenomenal. What they're doing at Platform Calgary is amazing. What's happening in the East Village, the new Saddle Dome, which I know that's not what it is, but there's so many interesting things happening in our city that I think that a little bit of research and you can get pretty excited of like the impact that's going to have. Do we have any electric buses? I know we're kind of, your position kind of came out against that. I did a little bit of research this morning. There's some jurisdictions that have piloted, some with success, some with not. It's kind of a mixed bag actually when you kind of look around, because that's a global preview when you start asking questions like that. Yeah.
I mean, I'm looking for proven technologies, not,
harebrained schemes.
To take a risk. Well, not so much that. It's just
not my words, not yours. Sorry, my words.
The cost around it is what I'm not interested in at this given time, right? We just spent over the last 4 years, $270 million on natural gas buses. We've spent $500 million on a natural gas refueling center to create efficiencies across the city fleet. At a point where we're taking loans to experiment with buses that haven't worked in Edmonton, they haven't worked in Austin, Texas, when our own administration has said, please don't do this because it's going to cause follow-on costs and problems. Listen to the experts, right? This is not something we need to gamble with right now. What we need to get focused on is getting back to basics, focusing on core services before we get into the experimental side of supporting ideology.
I really appreciate that. And I think the narrative around that in society has changed, where people are like, yeah, we want to make good choices for the environment, but we need to do it in a practical way. It isn't a spend at all cost mindset. I've seen that shift kind of across that cycle kind of came up and came down really quickly, but we're not saying it's not important, but I like what you said. Let's there's other communities that can de-risk that for us at the journey that we're on. Right?
And look, there's lots of ways as a city we can contribute, very locally with less cost to just making sure that we have a more positive impact on environment. We're not out to solve some of the global challenges we see, right? That's not our role as the city. We can participate in things, and we will do things to ensure that we create a greener and cleaner Calgary. But high cost experiments are just not what we need to be investing in right now.
Yeah, and I tend to agree with you. Back to making solid business decisions based on what's in front of us, kind of now. But 4 years is still kind of a now timeline when it comes to initiatives of that scope and scale. Hey, something I ran into a little bit, and maybe this is a weird thing to bring at the end, but I was online today and I found a little bit of drama, a little bit of issues around some of the polling information and maybe favoritism paid to certain parties. As an individual looking out there, should I trust those polls? Should I be skeptical? Should I use my critical thinking and check a couple sources? Because people use that as an influential, like, oh, who's trending and who's what. And I ran into some stuff this morning I didn't really like reading about in terms of what can be trusted and some of the risks out there by following polling data. Any recommendations just for citizens at large?
Largely in part, ignore the polls. They're all being paid for by the people that want to look good in those polls, right? The only real poll that matters is election day. And, I know there's a lot of talk out there about don't split the vote and what if and what out, at the end of the day, you've got candidates that you're going to have to figure out whether you support or not. And I think just vote for the person you think is the best. The polling is very skeptical. In fact, you read the fine print on it and you realize that they've made a lot of assumptions, and those assumptions are very misleading. From my perspective, I look at a lot of the social media polls that have been happening, and they paint a very different picture of what the election outcome could be. And, social media polls, while I would say are not the most scientific by any means, it's a general sense of who are you voting for? That's it. And people overwhelmingly vote in those polls very differently than the ones conducted on home lines or online or with limited sample sizes.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. Be critical thinking, be skeptical, but at the end of the day, it's up to you to quote unquote do your research, get out there. There's so many candidates, and obviously there's the mayoral side, there's the individual ward that you're in. Looking for some insight, looking for things that resonate with you, and I really appreciate what you said. Looking for someone who's got the longer term game and the experience to get it done, and hence why I certainly am putting my support in your corner. And I do love your business background, and I think that this is a massive business that we're running here with an incredibly large group of stakeholders, which ultimately doesn't make it any easier, does it?
No, but it's important.
Jeff, thanks for coming on. Thanks for the work you do. Any last words you want to share? I think you've done a great job of encapsulating it today.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me on. For those who want to learn more about me, JeffDavisonYYC.com is the website. And no matter what, get out and vote on October 20th.
100%. If you don't get out and vote, you don't have a reason to complain. You don't have the right to complain afterwards. Those are my words, not yours. But get out there. I think it's an amazing opportunity that we have to vote. Do not take it for granted.
Absolutely.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.